Hello and welcome to the first installment of our series of webinars. Please excuse any stage fright, but the first episode is always something big for us, and hopefully this is going to be something memorable. So today we're gonna talk about 5 reasons why software development outsourcing fails. And first to give you some information about some ground rules we're gonna follow. Our runtime is going to be about 50 minutes. You can always ask us questions in the chat box, which I will answer at the end of the presentation. In case you have any kind of anonymous questions, requests for presentation, you can write to me at the address visible here, Michał at Curiosum.dev. And for any urgent and random issues, my teammate David is on the chat at all times to assist you. So in case of any technical difficulties, if maybe I'm not audible or the video is not good quality, just drop us a line at the chat so we can have a look at that. All right, so the agenda of today's webinar is, I would say, very simple. First of all, we'll introduce ourselves to us. I'll talk about a bit about myself and our company, and then we'll outline the 5 reasons we already mentioned in the title, which are expectations versus reality, tech choices, time management and trust, communication issues, and finally, neglecting the human element in it all. And afterwards, you will have a chance to use the remaining time to get some answers from us to your questions that you might have during the presentation. All right, so something about me. I'm the co-founder at Curiosum, which I'll talk about in a second. My name is Michał. I've been a developer all my career, and I mainly specialize in backend with Elixir and Phoenix as my main favorite technologies, but I also play around with stuff like Linux administration and generally functional programming and so on. I've taught coding at camps and seminars, which I really love doing, as I love sharing my knowledge and experience in general. Over my career, I worked in dozens of smaller and larger development projects with industries such as healthcare, e-learning, booking, law, and many others. And well, in my free time, I also like playing the guitar, but I'm really glad I don't have to live off it, because this is not my main talent. So I stick to what I do best. Okay. I co-founded Curiosum recently, and we do bespoke software development for clients from all over the world. And every one of us has already plenty of experience which we can use to tell what works and what doesn't in software development outsourcing. So I hope to capitalize on that today. We mainly specialize in Elixir, Phoenix, React, and generally mobile and web app development. And we also serve as an outsourcing company, as we can both take over your app development or can even remotely lease you an experienced developer for your project, so you can expand your team in a week or maybe less. Okay, for more from us, you can head to our blog at curiosum.dev. Visit our LinkedIn and Facebook pages, and stay ready, because we are launching a podcast series about the curiosities in the IT world very soon. So that's about us, and let's get going. All right, so first, to give you some background on outsourcing as a concept. Well, according to Clutch, outsourcing is a popular and profitable idea. Last year, about 40% of small and medium companies outsourced some business processes, with further 15% intending to do so. And well, larger companies outsource much more frequently than this. So, well, that's a big thing. And why people even outsource in the first place? Well, there are three key reasons. First is getting expert help. Second is increasing efficiency. And third is lowering costs. And what about the details are, well, getting expert help. Because we can't always recruit as many full-time specialists as you would like to. Increasing efficiency, because through outside expertise, you improve your processes and bring more capacity to company operations. And lowering costs, for instance, hiring is one of the most painstaking and costly processes companies need to survive. And that's especially crucial in IT, where the competition for top experts is deadly. So taking the practical factor into account, that is one of the reasons that IT industry in general is one of the leaders when it comes to using outsourcing. But outsourcing can be also pretty difficult to pull off. It is a complex dance of two independent business organisms. There are many risks and pitfalls, and some are more dangerous than others. So in the main part of the webinar, I will go into top 5 reasons why a cooperation in the area of software development outsourcing may go wrong. So the first main reason is a war between expectations and reality. So let's maybe begin with the diagnosis. What is actually wrong? Because outsourcing is such a broad concept that it's very common to discover completely different points of view about it between two companies in the same industry. Who is responsible for what, how we work, how we communicate, etc. So the first step should always be ask the partner how precisely do they work and what are their experiences with outsourcing software development. And maybe if you need further confirmation than the usual testimonials and portfolio, it's a good idea to ask about contacting a previous client directly, because people are often surprisingly willing to share their experiences. So we know that outsourcing is flexible in form, but some common mistakes often arise. And these are the 3 key cases where expectations outmatch what is really possible. So the first one is unrealistic scheduling, which calls for asking yourself the question, how can we deal with this? Well, while drawing the scope of work and making assumptions about the time necessary to do a project, it's easy to miss the mark, which is absolutely no surprise, as estimates are always flawed. But you can protect yourself from adverse consequences in several ways. First, make sure you pick the right partner, one that will be inquisitive, will have agency, will not be afraid to ask questions and check you a little bit. A company that glances at your scope and immediately says, yeah, let's do it, is a welcome sign. But you have to understand software house's motivation as well. Projects are live, and rejecting them seems to them like bad business, but it's actually the opposite. You want to find a comfortable common space with your partner where you know that they understand the scope of the project well. In some cases, feature-based contracts may be a good idea. You do not pay for man hours, you pay for delivering specified features. Next, you need exquisite planning, and that necessary groundwork will pay off later. This is something which usually relies on strong leadership in the company, as designing, communicating, and maintaining a schedule can be rough. So in the planning, you need to understand that the planning process needs to achieve some specific goals. First, software estimates are documented and can be used for planning and tracking the project. Second, the activities and commitments are well documented. And third, relevant stakeholders, groups and individuals have agreed to their scope of commitments in the project. I understand this is all very basic, but remember that not every company out there is a tech company with certified Scrum or ITIL project managers with software experience. To give you an example that I've seen in my career, I've seen many outsourcing attempts that failed before they even materialize properly. For example, not long ago, we had a client come up to us with an extremely unrealistic schedule, and well, guess what? We did not take him because after some discussion, we showed that the full process, development, testing, preparing the infrastructure and maintenance would take at least twice as long as the client wanted, which is a lot. So it was clear that the client was under heavy pressure and could not relent, but so couldn't we. It was clear that even with our capacity, which was definitely enough, the wind up and the process would need way more time. Another case where expectations can miss the mark is short-term thinking about and disregarding future technical debt. There are times that short-termism can be the right strategy, but usually that's just for a moment. So I will not rip everybody who disregarded technical debt. Maybe there are right circumstances and good reasons for that particular organization. However, technical debt, just like financial debt, accumulates interest. The longer it is unpaid, the more you have to pay in the end. The longer reworks or refactoring or updates are avoided, the bigger the debt will be. Nonetheless, remember that this debt can appear on its own just because the tech world is running forward. You need maintenance and a strong focus in the long term. So you also have to realize that technical debt, as we said, can appear on its own. So it's kind of an accidental debt, or can be something that you're aware of right from the beginning of the project, and that's a strategic debt which you're aware of and is manageable, and that's not a bad thing in its own, but still it has to be something which is well understood in the process. So that's something which always happens when when there is some kind of new feature that everyone wants, and there comes the technical debt, and all the deadlines are suddenly unrealistic to fulfill. Using 100% of your time to quickly write new features usually does not help that code be future-proof or even easy to maintain later on. And with passing time, it's increasingly difficult to assign just one person to the refactoring and restructuring the code. And remember that the devs that do the refactoring must be fully focused on that, otherwise it just won't work. The investment must be bigger, but also the gains from such a thorough cleanup will be bigger. Then an important question you have to ask yourself is how to take to stakeholders, including non-techies, about the tech debt. By some estimates, 40% of the time is spent managing forms of technical debt, which is an insane amount of time and operational expenses. This is a small saving now, which will grow into a larger investment later. tech debt can be a burden to a company in the worst of times, and lack thereof, salvation in crisis. And the last point that can be used is that, more specifically, tech debt is crucial in industries with strong regulatory and compliance burdens, and where cybersecurity is key to secure sensitive data or critical services. Tech debt increases the chance of a big screw up significantly. So companies, large and small, fight with tech debt all the time. A good example is when Twitter changed its front end. It's some of the code base from Ruby to Java, or more specifically Scala, as it had troubles with its search function, and sought a tool which would give them higher scalability and maintainability. So it has paid its debt. Well, not all debt is equally alarming, so at least make sure you know how deep in it you currently are and what the outlook for the next 2-3 years is. Okay, and then the final case of misplaced expectations is a case of sunk cost fallacy, which can be described as an aversion to a clean slate start. I will not go into too much details, but somewhere around the two examples above, there is an organization that misses the point where it is no longer profitable to continue with the solution they currently have, and that some legacy elements, usually the code, are a bottleneck. However, at the time, the cost of change still seems too high, or the financial constraints are significant. So back to software development consulting, this often results in managers clinging to the old stuff instead of going for a deep rebuild for a bit too long. This also possibly lowers what those managers think they want to pay for development outsourcing. All right, so to give you 3 key points to end this chapter. First, plan stuff together with your outsourcing partner. Start cooperation with the partner early so they can aid you and participate in the planning and design process. Well, be open to suggestions for which tech to choose. It's very good to have an open mind to technologies, so you can choose those which can yield expected results. And be aware that some things do not do a facelifting. They need to be just torn down to the ground. Just like some buildings just need a tear down already, even if they are still useful in a way. And it's the same with software. All right. So now that we've wrapped up the first chapter, in which we talked about a war between expectations and reality, now we're going to talk about the quest for perfect technology and tools, which is just about doing the right tech choices. Sometimes changing tech and rewriting portions of the code will not make sense at all. This also directly relates to the tech debt issue we already covered. But wait, is she holding you back? I mean, is the lady representing your old solution actively hamstringing your future? But wait again, don't you dare making large tech changes without your team being on board. Well, okay, we can play with memes all day long, but the key thing is that there is always a hard balance to strike with technology. And I think there are 3 issues I would like to talk about here. The key issues are development speed against future scalability, using familiar tech, not the best tech, and choosing the wrong tech for my team and its know-how. So this is a kind of misalignment of tech goals and humans on the team, while the point about familiar tech versus the best tech is often about CTOs being hell-bent on using technologies he or she is comfortable with instead of tech that solve the problem best. So to give you a short anecdote, there is a cool blog many of you may know, Boffinism, where they're telling a story where the tech lead is giving the outsourcing partner reasons why they are working in Elixir instead of Ruby. So here goes the code. We wanted to make sure we keep the recommendation engine separate from the e-commerce engine, and using a different tech stack enforces that, as if that couldn't have been enforced without mixing in two different tech stacks, right? And we thought that the recommendation logic would be well suited to a functional style, whereas it would all get a bit messy if it ended up inside an active record model, which to me is not really indicative of any shortcoming of a given technology, but just some kind of something more related to the expertise of the team. And Elixir is a straightforward language. Any developer worth the salt should be able to pick it up easily, which is, I would say, kind of a strong assumption. Okay, so going back to the risks we outlined, there are several answers to those risks. None of them is perfect, but in vast majority of cases, those should be enough. First of all, you have to remember that without trust, there is no point in outsourcing. It's always good to trust your software house with technology choice, because your particular familiarity with technology X does not mean that X is the best to achieve the specific goals. And for this trust to make sense, you have to first trust the understanding of your business goals by the partner. After all, tech is there to make money. Second, make tech decisions based on data. Ask yourself which tech and tools fit my project and team best. Choose the tech partner based on the reasoning about the possible synergy with your own assets and the need to pick this best fitting technology, and ask yourself if the partner has adequate manpower and know-how. And do not outright reject a diverse technology stack used in different elements of your application. Obviously, the criteria here is if the varied technologies can bring tangible benefits, and that's not just for the sake of it. All right. We've got some links for further reading. We'll share the presentation later on with you, so you can come back to this and read something more about this. For example, you can read about why polyglot, which means using different languages for different jobs, different tasks, is killing your enterprise, and learn about why it's not always like this. Something about technology risks which can cause software outsourcing to fail. Something also about the importance of empowering teams to choose the tools they wish to use and they feel comfortable with. And also how outsourcing leads to increasing technical debt and why it should be taken into account when deciding to outsource or not. All right, now that we've wrapped up the subject of seeking perfect technology and tools, let's talk about the third key reason of software development outsourcing failures, which is bad time management and the missing link of trust. So what symptoms does this issue show in our projects? First, micromanagement, which is essentially a lack of faith in the ability of the team to self-organize properly. Secondly, it's the lack of understanding of work characteristics in its and its practice, the work specificity and the knock-on effects of the schedule and work pace, and top-down only estimating, which leads to schedules being unrealistic, which is kind of linked to something I talked about earlier, the war between expectations and reality. It's really a part of it. This is also related to the lack of understanding of work characteristics because, well, that's a very common management issues stemming from the fact that the top levels often just don't know what the work is about at the bottom. So to give you an example I saw during my career, a company I worked for had a client, and that client's rep started questioning the expertise and professionalism of the outsourced development team. The reason was that works that were moved further and further in time until they became problematic took way more time than estimated, which led to, unhappiness of both parties because it was seen as unprofessional and not up to the high standards the client expected. So this, despite the cooperation lasting a few years before that, this became a reason for the sales to lose trust in each other, and finally to the end of the cooperation. Another personal advice from me, with the lack of trust in the development team that a company starts to cooperate with, micromanagement arises very quickly, and I would say instead of falling into micromanagement, in most cases it's a good assumption that the other side has specialists that have some capacity to self-organize. As well, hand steering projects also has its downsides. All right, so how do we fight issues of trust and time management, which are pretty much linked together? The outsourcing team is both autonomous and a part of your team. It won't work identically, but cultural and cultural fit will matter a lot. There are good and bad cultural fits out there, and despite the relative lack of visible daily cooperation that some development outsourcing contracts require, when the time to exchange information or a milestone arrives, you prefer to have a partner that works similarly to you and values similar traits. Importantly, the outside team is an extension of your own team, and that is how you should think about it. However, there needs to be some autonomy, as I said, and self-organization. The team won't be happy to perceive themselves as just pieces in the outsourcing puzzle. Secondly, if you're struggling with micromanagement, do institute some kind of everybody owns some area rule, however small that area is. This is an approach which advises splitting responsibility for subtasks and therefore clearly delineates responsibilities. Trust is clearly the major currency in this discussion. Outsourcing is not only economic optimization and cutting off excess processes. It's kind of a temporary merger with a partner in new areas. So if that thought scares you, maybe outsourcing is not for you. All right. To build on that, there is some further reading, which one of the articles focuses on the issues of trust and micromanagement in software development teams, and the other one is about how to do the opposite of micromanagement, which is hands-off management in an effective way. Well, now on to the fourth reason software development outsourcing fails, which can be described as a desperate talk to me please calling, or the problem of lack of communication. I think the key aspects of communication in software development outsourcing that can be problematic are as follows. I want AAA, but you want AAB kind of scenario, or where the client and their management has varying and or contradictory expectations and ideas. Late review and feedback, and the following issue of work getting outdated. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, bad formulation of requirements or even complete lack thereof. And this is what happens when expectations and requirements are unclear, and I've seen this many times in my career. So to give you a more specific and serious example, I've seen with my own eyes, with a certain project, the roles of their CEO and CTO were in flux and somewhat overlapping, especially in terms of overseeing the development team and issuing requirements. So I think the responsibilities were being maybe transferred between them at the time. And well, the conflicting requirements and unclear channels of communicating important information ultimately lead to growing frustration in the project and new features being significantly delayed. But worry not, millions of books and articles and podcasts were made to give us some answers as to how we can improve project communication, especially with the team that develops a software for a client. So, as usual then, it will be about implementation with this, as working on communication requires a lot of time, great people, and management buy-in. So hopefully you can spare those. First, give the outsourcing team freedom in making decisions where your input is not really needed, because that's something which often makes management harder, where every decision needs input from the top level of the company. So please delineate those areas to the outsourcing team and give them responsibility for them. Second, make extremely clear who is responsible for what area and which decisions. So always make it clear, and thus you will cancel the stress and moments of indecision that waste everyone's time. Thirdly, expect honesty, especially with scheduling estimates. This is very important because it's, well, the lack of honesty leads to estimates being unrealistic, and there we go again with the unrealistic schedule issue. Do not expect the estimates to match your expectations, but expect information as to why old estimates were wrong if they have. All right, so in the fourth place, do not be the only channel of communication between in-house and outsourcing teams, and set up ground rules for regular lower level communication. And avoid requirements ping pong by crafting them in an unambiguous manner for the first time around. All right. So for some further reading, there are some articles that I think are interesting in this in the topic of communication in software development. Something I did not cover in this presentation, but is really interesting, is the topic of cultural barriers and how to improve intercultural communications in software outsourcing. You can also read a bit about 4 outsourcing mistakes companies still make, and lastly, there is a practical guide to writing technical specs, so the requirements are can be better defined. Okay, so wrapping this up, the last key reason for software development outsourcing failures is often neglected, but is equally important as the other reasons, and maybe more in some cases, which is the human element of working in an outsourcing projects. Well, there are many metaphors management gurus used to describe relations in a team, but I think most just add an unnecessary and worse, untrue layer on top of what most people understand perfectly well. So, no, your team does not have to be like a huge family, nor does it have to be like a professional sports team or like a pack of buddies. Well, most of us do not have to be taught, but we know others have their egos, ambitions, desires, strengths, and weaknesses as individuals. So, software development is a team effort, and each part needs some validation to feel like the work is worth it. And, well, yeah, money obviously is validation too, before you ask. Yeah, so that's a case of someone with a very specific kind of ambition, which is one of the types of ambition commonly found in developers. But people's ambitions vary, and according to Stack Overflow's service, these are aspects they look for when looking for a job. And apart from very technical factors like languages, frameworks, technologies to work with, and so on, there are a lot of human factors in this. So like office environment or company culture, which is very important for almost half of job seekers. Opportunities for professional development, which is a purely ambition thing. How widely used or impactful my work output would be, which is also directly related to human ambition. And it was selected by almost a quarter of the participants of the survey. So as you can see, human factors are very important in making in keeping developers happy. And I can perhaps tell you a personal anecdote, which is about a project I was involved with, in which there was kind of an eggs in one basket scenario in many ways. Because in my beginning years as a developer, I worked on a big project with increasingly abundant technical debt, legacy technology usage, and so on. And right from the beginning of my involvement, there were 2 developers, myself and someone else, which was always someone different, because I adapted to the circumstances well enough, so everyone was happy with my contributions, and so was I for some time. But it was always like the other developer, whoever it was, seemed to be struggling with communication, late feedback, the huge amount of time needed to deliver anything, the lack of feeling that your work actually gets deployed and has real value. So while the client was happy with my contributions, and so was the company I worked for, and so on, while the other developer that worked with me always eventually got rotated out of the project. And in most cases, that was at his own request. Over time, I felt increasingly burnt out and frustrated because I felt that my desire for challenges just wasn't fulfilled in this project anymore. but it was increasingly harder to rotate me out because I grew to be the only person who knows the ins and outs of certain areas in the app. So finally, the outsourcing collaboration ended because I asserted my desire to jump out, because I was really burnt out at the time. And well, there was no belief that someone inside the team could replace me in a seamless way. So that's how it all ended. So, okay, we are all adults. Probably we will not discover an entirely new way of treating people, but you can still try to make a tweak here and there. Well, a couple of examples of such tweaks. First of all, remember that development is a team game, and every team member is different. The parts of the team have personalities, ambitions, and temperament, and you can't cancel those. In the second place, do make an experiment in which you imagine a top dev gets hit by a train tomorrow. Can the work continue soon? And how resilient is the team from emergencies? So plan for a contingency. Whatever we do, even with perfect team management, remuneration, and perks, and so on, there's always the risk of random events or personal or professional burnout, which can happen to anybody. And it's possible to have every project run in such a way that rotating team members or replacing someone with anyone else should not be a problem in case of an emergency. And this can also be done proactively to keep people engaged and let a new set of eyes take a fresh look at the old issues regularly. The consequence of this is to avoid dead ends where a specific know-how is only with one person. Okay, and the next thing to do is to give both teams validation. Do vocalize that the job the team is doing is important and valuable, because this has really been shown to work, appreciating people and so on. Be open about which parts of the work you appreciate and what positive effects you see. And finally, without sounding too cheesy, make sure that the project is a form of challenge to your outsourcing team. So this is like a challenge to overcome, and it feels like that to the developers. Some extra reading that you can come back to later about keeping developers happy and motivated and without burnout. So, all right, there you have it. 5 reasons why software development outsourcing phase explained. The first one, a war between expectations and reality. Secondly, the confusing and unending quest for perfect technology and tools. Third, bad time management practices and trust issues. Fourth, the mega challenge of communicating well with other human beings. And last but not least, not taking the human element of ambition, temperament, and how they like to be treated seriously enough. All right. Thank you for listening and participating in the webinar. Now we have 5 to 10 minutes for a short Q&A. So we'll answer the questions that we saw in the chat, and and you also have a chance during that time to ask some more questions if you'd like to. Okay, so the first question from Johan about the examples of technical debt, where thank you, Johan, for asking the question, because maybe I didn't really explain this well enough for the examples. So, a lot of times there are projects which are done in a hurry or a rush, and kind of it's kind of visible when you take over such a project from a different software development agency. Well, you see that good design patterns are not followed, the architectural solutions are not good, suboptimal, library versions are stale, outdated, and so on. And at some point, well, this is kind of the debt which accumulates over time, because in the ideal case, you always follow the design patterns which are known to work well. You always keep the libraries up to date. You always have, well, full test coverage and so on, which is also very important. And well, this is, like I said, some kind of debt that accumulates over time. And there always, just like with financial debt, there always comes a time in which the debt has to be paid. Well, maybe to give you an example, in some cases, it's really an unexpected moment. Just I remember a couple of years ago, I ended up having to, well, unable to do any development on the project at all because, well, back in the day, I was a Ruby developer, and the project used a end-of-life version of Ruby, which no longer supported, well, which didn't support OpenSSL versions later than some kind of version which was used to be included in old Linux distros. And I actually couldn't use it with current versions of Ubuntu, so that was a debt I had to pay immediately because it just happened out of a sudden, and yeah, I couldn't really work on it anymore. So who is responsible for tech debt, and what who should be aware of it and like be guilty if it happens? Well, the answer is it depends. I think if well, if a project is done in a hurry, I think the development team, and I'm just talking about regular programmers, not the persons who make decisions, can't really do much about this because even the best developer will not create a perfect solution when extremely pushed on time, and even the best developer will create new technical debt when told to create a feature in a day or even a week if it's a big one. So I would say mostly it's the responsibility is on the ones who decide. But if the team doesn't really possess the expertise required to do such a project in a clean way, then the burden is also on the team. Yeah, so going back to a question from Soan, different companies give different predictions, and I believe many of them might be overestimated, or as you said, underestimated. So how to manage where the truth lies? There is no clear answer to this. I think managing where the truth lies involves consulting, well, having someone you trust and you can consult the results you got with. Because, well, when you consult different companies about this and they have, well, different processes, sometimes different tech stacks, even if you can, well, insist on them estimating based on some specific tech stack you want them to use. I think it's always very good to have someone you trust and can consult the estimates with, because, well, I would say software development agencies don't really tend to give you unrealistic estimates unless they want to self-destruct because it's not a good scenario for anyone. Because, well, in the end, it's always going to end up everyone being unhappy about this. So, as I said, ask someone you trust, and you can, well, and that's a kind of a way to manage where the truth lies. Okay, so the next question: is it okay to hire somebody from outside to consult such estimations? Well, it's hard to answer this because it depends. Well, it kind of depends on on what you're allowed to do with the specific estimates, because stuff is, well, there is always the please treat us confidential note in those kind of emails, so that's not easy to decide. But if you have someone versatile enough and experienced enough to that has seen many of these kind of projects in the past and estimates, and can sense that this kind of feature, for example, a sign-in using Google single sign-on, well, it's if the estimate is that it's going to take 2 months to implement a single scenario like this, then this trusted person will tell you that it's not really something legitimate. So, well, in a case by case on a case by case basis, you can judge if it's okay to hire somebody from outside to consult such estimations. But well, I can't answer this in a general way. Okay, so a question from Kari. So how to communicate with when the project is being late to make both sides happy? Because a lot of times both sides are guilty, but the one of them are paying. Well, first of all, when to prevent the paying party from being unhappy about this, both parties can settle on a fixed price model when the features are estimated, the development time is assessed in advance, and both parties agree that this estimate is binding and calculate a fixed price based on that, and then no one is unhappy about that too much, unless the estimations was like 2 or 3 times wrong, which is never good for any of the parties. But when the project is actually late, I think the key answer to this question is to keep honest, as I said, because even if you had been honest during the estimation phase, it may have gone wrong. It's totally okay. I mean, it just happens. So if you remain honest from the beginning of your collaboration, then even in case something goes wrong, like the estimates, just be honest as well. So keep being honest, and that's the solution, I would say. All right. Okay, I can see Kari is writing. So perhaps there is one more question coming. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for participating in our first webinar. I think there's gonna be more to come. So stay tuned and follow our social media for more content like this. Look for our podcasts, which are going to be started very soon. And yeah, thanks for participating, and Have a good day.